Hello and welcome to episode 97 of the Arena Regulars podcast. I'm Zach.
And I'm Jeff.
And we're your source for drunken Magic the Gathering arena content.
Yep, basically we're just some regular dudes drinking some irregular beers, talking about Magic the Gathering, usually the online client MTG Arena, but not today.
Yeah, that's right. This week we are going to talk about paper Magic, in particular, going to your first paper Magic tournament. Jeff and I got to go play in a Pioneer event this last weekend, and we're going to talk a little bit about that, as well as my first real competitive tournament. So, yeah, hopefully this will give you some tools to get you in there, because it was a blast. Yeah, tournaments are cool.
Yeah.
Though, as always, each episode we both bring a beer, we drink Jeff's, then drink mine, rate them on a scale of bronze to mythic, and choose the best for last. So with that, Jeff, what is on tap for this Monday night?
All right, for this Monday night, we have a beer called Monday Night Piper.
Ooh.
This is a Scottish-style ale from Second Wedge Brewing Co. It's inspired by the sounds of bagpipe practice, the Uxbridge Legion. It's allegedly drinks smooth with tantalizing sponge toffee flavor, a hint of sweetness, and a balanced, dry finish. So I'm excited to give this one a try.
Yeah, Scottish style. I think Jeff and I both realized when we were just grabbing it right now, we've been calling it an English style for the last couple weeks, getting ready for this episode, being like, oh no, it's actually Scottish. That's great. You don't see as many of these. Mm-hmm. Anyway, happy to see this. We have some Magic news. The face-to-face tour was this last weekend, the tournament that we went to. The main event was the Toronto regional championship, though we weren't qualified for the championship. So we played in the Pioneer Open, which would be qualifying us for the next regional championship. We have some other news. The Alchemy, the Brothers War cards are coming out in a couple weeks, as well as the Explorer Anthology 2 is scheduled to release on Tuesday, December 13th. There is going to be an announcement video. It'll already have been out by the time this episode comes out, so you'll probably know a bit more about that than we do, although I did find something online. Jeff, I don't know if you saw this yet, but it seems like you might by the smile on your face. But Fire Shoes on Twitter, if you're not following Fire Shoes on Twitter, before Twitter collapses, go follow him, because he's just gives the best information about tournaments and just everything in general, and does recaps of a bunch of articles. So helpful. But he was looking through the Arena Cube and saw a few new cards that we don't normally have on Arena. So he was speculating that maybe those are cards that are coming in Explorer Anthology. We're not really we'll talk more about those cards probably next week, because we'll actually know for sure. But Jeff, there's one card in particular that I'm assuming, excited about.
So pumped. I've been asking for this card literally on episode 1 of the podcast. I asked for this card. So it's been years. Maybe won't spoil it yet, though. We can talk about that.
All right. Okay, you won't spoil it. Perfect. All right.
Because I don't want to get my hopes up, and then it's just not there. It was a mistake or something, or it's just in the cube.
That's true. All right, that's true. But why would they put it in the cube if they're... Anyway, it doesn't matter.
I don't know.
That'll be a spoiler for next week, so just wait for that episode. We'll talk more about that. But this week, we are talking about tournaments, in particular, paper tournaments. How should we start this? We're kind of just having this is more of a discussion episode, just about, I don't know, going to them, some things there are some pitfalls you might fall into, or different things you should think about as you're signing up for a tournament or preparing for one, or when you're actually there. Just some little tips and tricks, and maybe a couple stories about our tournament this last weekend. But where should we really start? What do you think?
Well, the first thing that you want to do is find a tournament that you want to play in that you can get to.
Ooh.
Because you have to worry about getting to it. So basically I don't know, maybe a few weeks ago, I just kind of saw that the FDF Tour had this Pioneer Open, And I'd been playing a lot of Explorer, and Explorer is supposed to sort of eventually meld with Pioneer and be the same format, although that's going to take a long time. And I was really liking Explorer, and I was like, maybe I should just play in this Pioneer tournament. So I messaged you and was like, hey, I'm thinking of playing in this Pioneer tournament. Would you be interested? And then you were like, definitely. And then you started like acquiring cards, and I was like, okay, I guess it's happening now. We're playing in this tournament.
I got a little too excited, and I went like I picked my deck immediately. I was like, I'm playing this deck. I'm gonna get the cards. I'm going right now. I had basically had the whole deck within a couple weeks, and waited a few weeks with it, being like, I can't wait to play.
Yeah, that was the push I needed though, because at first I was like, I'm not gonna go alone. I don't think. Mm-hmm. Yeah,
that's true. Maybe the number one thing is find a tournament that's close to you and find a friend that will go with you that will be excited, because those are the big things of like, if you can carpool together to get there, that's always a good thing. And having someone to stand up and go talk to in between rounds is great, and be like, I lost again.
Yeah.
And they can be like, same. Yeah, it kind of sucks. And then you can, hang out and whatever else. It just makes it a lot more exciting. So, yeah, definitely try to find someone that will go with you.
And one thing we've done in the past is like have a bunch of friends who aren't really like competitive players, so they don't want to play in the same tournament as us, but they're often like side events, commander or draft side events, so they could sort of be in different events, but it's all hosted in the same place.
Yeah. So that you still can go over and they'll ask you like, oh, what's your record like right now, as they're playing their commander game or they're drafting or whatever. And so you'll still have people around, and they don't even have to be as or into the same type of Magic, I guess, quote unquote, as you are. So yes. There are some good websites that we go to regularly looking for, not specifically tournaments, but I guess decks, when you're trying to figure out what deck you're going to play for this tournament. So MTG Melee and the playing group of internet things, it's primarily Playing Pioneer. These are two great places to see what decks are being played very recently. MTG Melee specifically, because like there are so many tournaments that use that website to run their pairings, including the World Championship. All the tournaments that Wizards does, they use MTG Melee. So going out of there and seeing who has been winning or what decks have been winning, mainly what decks. I don't really know any of the people, so the decks are the ones that you want to know. Because that usually, if the top 8 of some Pioneer event recently had a lot of Is It Phoenix, you will expect to see Is It Phoenix at whatever tournament you're playing. Which is the case for us, kind of, in our preparation going into this tournament.
Yeah, I feel like pretty much everyone uses MTG Melee. Like, it used to be just for online tournaments during COVID, but now, because they developed out this great tournament software, everyone just uses it even for like in-paper events. So your tournament that you're playing in would probably be using it, and then it's a really great way to just say like, oh, what deck did well last weekend? You go to MTG Melee and you check.
Yeah, and it was really fun because we were playing on day 2 of the regional championship, so we could check their scores and see how they were doing, and trying to talk with each other and the other players around us, trying to figure out who was doing well in our tournament. Because for the Open, it wasn't actually on MTG Melee, but one other thing you need to do is download the companion app, the Wizards companion app, because it makes getting your pairings so much easier. Everything just goes straight to your phone. So if you don't have that downloaded, do it right now. It's just nice to have anyway. But you can see what players are doing well in the standings for your Open tournament that we were in. You just didn't know what decks anyone was playing. So that was a little bit different, but...
Yeah. Now, as far as like choosing your deck, I think there's a lot of interesting differences in paper events than online events. Like, whenever you're playing in a tournament, it's always a great idea to pick a deck as close, if you're waffling between a few different candidates or sideboard slots, stuff like that, you kind of want to leave it as late as you can, so that you can adapt to the meta, because the meta games evolve so quickly. You know, you're talking about, oh, check MTG Melee, was Phoenix doing well? And then, like you were saying, there was literally a tournament the same weekend that was a little earlier than our tournament. so we could check the results of, like, you know, it was on Saturday, we were playing on Sunday, and we could check the results of that event to try to get an idea of what people will be playing in our event, because actually, like, a lot of people that I played against day 2'd that tournament, lost their first round, which eliminated them from top 8 contention, and they dropped and joined the tournament that we were in. So not only is it, like, going to influence the metagame, it's literally the same people a lot of the time. Like,
yeah, or a lot of them were people that played in day 1, didn't make it, and are playing this open.
Yeah, exactly. So the stats are, like, directly correlated, because a lot of, like you said, that's probably even more common, that they just didn't do as well as they hoped. They booked the whole weekend away to, like, play in this tournament in case they did well. Might as well play in the Pioneer Open on Sunday.
Exactly. Just to keep it going, because if they qualify for this one, that means they're trying to qualify again for the next one, just to keep going at it to try to get Pro Tour invites. Because that's what the regional championships are. I think first place, did first place get an invite to Worlds? Did I see that? Is that correct? Do you know?
Yeah, if you win a regional championship, you get an invite to Worlds.
Yeah. So an invite to Worlds was given out, and then the other ones were invites to the Pro Tour. And it was really cool to have that, like, being in the same place, and also just knowing it's around here. I mean, it feels a little bit different. We're up in Toronto, so, you know, there's a lot of tournaments up and down the East Coast and stuff like that. So for whatever reason, they feel closer together. We're a little bit farther away, but it was just nice to feel a little bit more like competitive Magic was, like, closer to where we live. It was nice. I think of it kind of far away most of the time. But yeah, so that's the hard thing. So, picking your deck in general is difficult for any event that you're trying to do, and wanting to pick it as close to the tournament as possible is really hard, because in Arena, like, Jeff, you've talked about this before. I've done the same thing, where you can look at results for the tournament that happened, like, a couple hours before, pick one of the best decks or one of the top 8 decks, and just copy it, paste it, play it. And you can go into one and you can just do it. Because, sure, getting wild cards can be difficult or whatever, but we have a lot of the cards on Arena. It's just a lot easier to build decks and sleeve up decks and acquire the cards than it is in person, where you literally have to hunt down the physical card that, if there's a big tournament happening, it's not just that they're really expensive, because a lot of the cards are expensive. Like, maybe, I think our local store was charging like $40 for Fable the Mirror Breaker, which is just, like, a lot.
Yeah.
But the other thing is, some of the cards that you think, like, oh, it's only like $3, I can get 4 of them. Everyone's sold out. Like, every store in town is sold out of this card, because everyone is buying it for the tournament you're going to. So that was something I was very worried about, which is why I picked my deck immediately and tried to buy all the cards, because I was worried that they would be gone. And I think that might have been part of my downfall. I picked I picked my deck so early, which was totally fine. I don't think I should have made a different choice, but making sure I had all the pieces was one of my number one goals, and knowing that I can get them, which I did. I was able to do that, so I completed that goal of acquiring the cards I wanted to play. So,
by the way, Zach's saying he's, like, doesn't think he should have brought a different deck. All Sunday, the whole tournament, he was like, there were like 5 different decks. He was like, oh, I should have played this. There are just too many decks that you like. So anytime you see, like, someone playing a deck that you like, you're like, that's what I should have played.
I should have played that. I literally... Yeah. So I was playing Bant Spirits, which is not really a deck in Explorer, because you're missing... I've talked about this before. I think everybody on the podcast knows, but it's missing 2 key spirits, which hopefully we're getting in the Explorer anthology. But it's like a creature deck with Collected Company. But the decks that are doing well in Pioneer right now are, like, Celestia Angels plays Collected Company with, you know, good angel cards. That's actually, like, top 8ing and stuff. And Bant Spirits is not. So, yeah, so I was like, oh, man. But at the time when I had picked it, it seemed like a pretty good deck, and it was poised well. But that was like a month ago. So, you know, metagames shift fairly quickly. I am happy I have the cards now, but I hope that it's one of those things that I haven't really felt the same way of like, wow, I really hope that deck can be played again because I just have all these cards. Where on Arena, it's like, I can play whatever I want. I can, who cares? I have Wandering Emperor. But in Paper, I'm like, I'm not going to buy Wandering Emperor.
That's right, yeah. And that's the part, like, that makes it tough. With an online event, I've literally done the thing where I look at Saturday's event. Oh, this crazy, runes deck won the event. Never seen that. I'm just going to, and it had crazy numbers. I'm just going to play that on Sunday. And then I did really well on Sunday because I had the runes deck. But, it's just, card availability is a real issue in Paper. For my deck, I played Rakdos Sacrifice. I had to buy from 4 or 5 different vendors to get all my cards because vendors just didn't have the cards I needed. No one in Hamilton, where I live, had any Mayhem Devils. No one had any Cats or Ovens. Luckily, Face to Face in Toronto had all that stuff, and I was able to, pick it up at the tournament, place an order online. But then they didn't have, the pathways. They didn't have Blightstep Pathway. They didn't have Den of the Bugbear. I had to get that from... nobody in Hamilton had that, so I had to get that from, a different Toronto store. Zach went and picked it up for me. And, so if I wanted to make a last-minute deck choice, I just don't think I could have because I wouldn't have been able to acquire the cards I needed for it.
Yeah. So it, it makes me wish... Man, if you had a group of friends and everybody had a bunch of different cards, because you can let people obviously borrow your cards, and a lot of people do that. And it's a big camaraderie thing of oh, I have those lands, or I have a play set of now it's oh, I have a play set of Collected Company. I'm not going to play that card for this tournament. If someone's playing a Coco deck, just don't buy them. I'll lend you my Cocos. It's fine. Just give them back, and you just keep a list. And I love that aspect. Where in Arena, we don't have that. You can't give cards to people for a short period of time. And I really like that aspect of specifically competitive Magic, because casual players don't really lend cards to each other. They'll lend decks. They'll be oh, play my deck for this one thing. But it's usually not hey, here's some cards you'll need for the whole day or the whole weekend. Just hold on to those. I'll get them back when I can. And I like that kind of team mentality in competitive Magic that's let's all work together and try to beat everybody else. I really like that.
I was able to borrow enough stuff from you because you happen to have Blood Crypts and some pathways and stuff that I only sort of had to acquire half my mana base, at least as far as the expensive cards go.
Yeah.
And that goes a long way in allowing me to build this deck because having 4 of every Shockland and 4 of every, pathway, it's doable on Arena, but it's expensive in Paper.
It's very expensive. I've been turning my collection into those things. I'm actually happy that you borrowed them because probably I have them and I'm spending resources to acquire them. I may never actually play them in a real tournament. I'm just I like to know I have all of them.
Yeah.
So
I was like that with the fetch lands when I was first getting into Modern, or I was able to sort of get into Modern a little bit because I had spent time just getting all the fetch lands, even for color pairs I thought I wasn't even going to play.
Yeah, which is totally a thing. So once again, we've talked about this on Arena. If you want to get into a format, spend your rare wild cards on dual lands. Same thing. Though within Paper, because it feels a little bit more pricey, you might want to pick either your favorite colors or a monocolor deck. So you don't even have to do that and just kind of stick to those things. I mean, throughout most of the weekend, I was kind of jealous of playing mono red. I was like, man, I looked over, I saw somebody playing Bowmat Courier. I'm like, I want to be playing Bowmat Courier.
Me too, man. I was talking about putting Bowmat Courier in my deck. So
yeah, you should maybe 2. I don't know. You don't need 4, maybe, but
4.
All 4. I mean,
I go hard in the paint, man.
That's true. I'm a big fan of that card. But anyway, so I would say give yourself ample time with your tournament to have time trying to figure out exactly what you're going to do. Another good thing to do is probably practice the format you're going to play, because
Nah.
it's probably good practice. Though I will have to say that there was never a period of time in the tournament where I felt like there were really cards or strategies I didn't know what was happening and I had to read a bunch of cards. That wasn't really the case, because I'd been playing so much Explorer that the formats felt close enough together that most of the deck archetypes were similar. And it wasn't like just... There are a couple decks that aren't really in Explorer because they're missing some cards, like Lotus Field combo or something. But besides that, I was like, I know what your deck does. I know the cards that you're playing. I know all the interactions for the most part.
Yeah.
We'll get to that in a minute. But I did feel very prepared in that sense, even though technically I'd never played Pioneer. Sitting down in front of my opponent, I never felt like I had no clue what was going on, or I was like, what is your game plan? What the fuck is this? I didn't have that issue at all, which I was really worried about, honestly. So yes, practicing. I also had built like a pseudo spirits deck. Like it was missing a couple cards, but it was basically the deck. So I practiced sideboarding a lot and figure out which cards I ended up liking and how those cards work, which was so helpful, because sideboarding in paper is also hard because I don't know, you have to search through your deck to find the card you're trying to pull out, and you're like,
I know, that was so annoying.
especially in the spirits deck where a lot of the cards are like the same, look like the same picture. You're like, wait, which spirit is oh yeah, it's another blue spirit that costs 2. That anyway. So that was a little scary. Also, because you have to de-sideboard your deck. But at the end, you're like, and it's so nerve-wracking because there's judges everywhere, and they're like checking your deck. But ultimately, the judges are on your side, and we'll talk more about that in a little bit. But yeah, so never have I been so happy that I can just relax on Arena. It'll do it for me. It counts the cards for me. It just tells me you have too many cards, or you don't have enough cards in your deck. You're not going to just get like disqualified. It just won't let you start the match if you don't have enough cards in your deck.
Yeah.
Where in paper, you could totally just have 58 cards and not even know.
For sure. I think there's even an announcement about that. Like somebody found a card on the floor, like on a chair or something, and the judge was like, hey, if you're playing this card, like check your deck to make sure you have it, because you might be getting you might be playing with an illegal deck.
Scary stuff.
The other thing I was just going to say about deck selection is, because the cards are so hard to acquire quickly, and because it's, it is real money and it's expensive and stuff, I would say your bias should be to pick decks that you like. Like, I think nobody really needs that push anyways, but unless you're one of these people that has the pro play group that can quickly change decks on a dime, like one of the worst experiences would be, I'm going to build Lotus Field because I know it's the best deck, even though I hate combo. And then maybe you do okay in the event, but then after that, Lotus Field is no longer the best deck, and you're just stuck with this deck you hate that's not even good anymore. So that was what made my decision was, I was thinking of a few different options. And eventually I was just like, I should just build Rakdos Sack, because even if that deck isn't good, it's tier 2, which I think it is, I still know how to play it and enjoy playing it. So I'll, as long as they don't ban Cat Oven or something, the deck's going to be something I could bring. And anytime I'm like, there's a Pioneer event going on, now I have this base of cards that I could just change the sideboard or add in any new cards from the new set or whatever. I think that's a super important aspect of paper that, while is still a thing on Arena, people still play their pet decks and all that, I think it's more pronounced in paper because it's so much harder to change decks in paper than it is online.
Yeah. And, that's a big reason why I've loved playing Arena, because it's just funny because I have been playing Arena for so long now that I just forgot some of those things about it's my pet deck because those are the cards I have. And that happens at the beginning of when you're playing Arena, but when you start to get enfranchised and you start playing a lot, that isn't really the case anymore. You're just like, I can play whatever I want for the most part. You're like, yeah.
Totally. Whereas in Paper, it's like you're selling your deck to buy the next one if you're changing decks at all.
Yeah. And it's especially hard when sometimes you can't even sell some of the cards back because they won't buy them.
Right. Nobody wants them anymore.
Yeah. They're like, oh, yeah. The reason you're selling that deck, like everyone's selling that deck now. So like the card prices drop drastically. You lose a bunch of money. You're already going to lose a bunch of money by trying to sell cards back to a store because they don't buy them for the same price that they sold them, obviously. So
right. Chasing like the best deck in the format has a very natural buy high, sell low cadence to it. Because you're like, I want to buy the cards that are the best deck currently. Oh, it's no longer the best deck. I need to sell it to buy the cards that are the best deck. So you're like constantly buying at the peak and selling at the valley.
Or you can do what Andrea Mengucci has, like a whole MTG Finance thing. It's not really MTG Finance, but his kind of quote is buy high, never sell. That's his MTG Finance.
Just solid financial advice.
It just always spend as much.
That's how most people I know play the stock market. So.
Yeah. Buy high, never sell. Oh, man. Yeah. Though, like, that is how everybody found out about Ledger Shredder, is because all these pros were coming back from stores and showing. That's how I saw it. It was just like, they're selling this card for like 25 cents. And they had, as many as it fills up their entire playmat of all the Ledger Shredders they have. They're like, this card's insane. And you're like, no. What? And then, of course, now it's
stupid Ledger Shredder scalpers.
Yeah, $20 or whatever. And you're like, ugh. But that's a whole other beast that we don't have to deal with most of the time. Though I would say, if you want to start dipping your toes into Paper, just go find one of the decks, and then see how expensive they are. And there are budget options. It's not like you can't find something that's a bit less expensive, but maybe start keeping track of the prices. And maybe that's a fun game for you and you enjoy watching the prices go up and down, or up and up and up and up. But like, what is it? Haunted Ridgeline, that the Rakdos Slowland is like selling.
It was
like $30.
So expensive. Yeah.
For a card that shouldn't be $30. Just because all the other ones.
It's like more expensive than Blood Crypt.
Yeah, which is crazy. And in comparison, the Dimir one of the same land cycle is like $3. So
yeah,
that's what we're talking about. That can be really frustrating. So yeah, you can always bring a brew if you want. Jeff knows a lot about that, of bringing brews to tournaments and testing them out. So
yeah, it used to be the only thing I could afford. I couldn't afford meta decks, or I didn't. Not that I couldn't afford it, but I wasn't willing to spend that much on the hobby at that time. So that was my thing. Just go to local events with some like crazy random brew. Try to identify whatever rare is like 50 cents that nobody is using, but is actually decent, because a lot of the 50-cent rares actually suck, but some of them are like kind of decent.
Most of them suck.
Yeah. There's always the diamond in the rough. And that was like that was a lot of fun for me, and I still like do that on Arena now because it's fun. But it's like super costly on Arena because there are no 50-cent rares. They're all a one wild card.
Yeah.
So it like saved me money up front, but probably cost me on Arena because I'm always like blowing wild cards on stupid rares that I really shouldn't be crafting.
Yeah, like over the top.
Don't craft that.
Yeah, don't craft that. But yeah, and really at the end of the day, with all the tournaments and things, it's really good to, like, when you're even just sitting down and playing your deck, to take things slow, because you're probably going to get fucking crushed. Like, you're just going to get wrecked. It's just the nature of the beast. Go in with a goal. Have a realistic goal. I mean, you can shoot for the moon if you want, but be prepared to be like. I think ultimately, we were talking on the after party last week about I wanted to get like high up, and then slowly as we were talking, I was like lowering and lowering my standards to try to figure out exactly what I was going for. And eventually, it came down to I want to win one match, which I did. So as soon as that happens, you're like, all right, check, I did it. I can drop now. I won a match.
Yeah, exactly. Like most of the people who are listening to this, I assume are not the sharks who are going into all these competitive events all the time.
Yeah.
Maybe you are, and you expect to dominate the event. That's great. But those are the people you are playing against. Like, legitimately, like, my first opponent was from Edmonton, which, for those who don't know, is very far. It's, like, on the west coast and on the east coast.
He took a plane, yeah.
Yeah, he had to fly to... Now, maybe he has family around, who knows? But he flew for this event, mostly... Or the bigger event that he then, after not doing well in that, jumped into this event. But, and then, like, this is the type of person that travels the country to play in all of the big, important tournaments. He's going to be well-versed in the metagame. He's going to have, like, practiced a lot. And if you're anything like me, he's going to have a deck that your deck can't possibly beat in a million years. So there are just like people like that you will be playing against, and that puts you at a disadvantage. It doesn't mean you can't win, but if you're probably not practicing as much as the people that you'll be playing against.
Yeah, if you're just one of our regulars, that's fine though, because I was going to kind of save this until later, but ultimately, like, it was so much fun playing in the tournament, even though I didn't do extremely well.
Right.
All my opponents were very nice, and all really sweet people, and we got to joke a little bit and have a good time. Like, there was no person around me, even the one person that was, like, kind of next to me that seemed like, oh, maybe that person might be taking things too seriously. Ended up, I heard them being able to have a good time with their opponent too. And I was like, oh, okay. Every person I kind of pinpointed being like, oh, maybe they're kind of the quintessential, what I was assuming would be like spiky or just like not fun to kind of be around. That didn't really happen. Everyone was so chill and talking about how horrible their deck was, just like me. And oh man, I wish I should have played that instead. It was good time. It was a lot of good fun. It was a lot of good fun.
Lots of good fun. Although there was that one guy we met that was like, yeah, my deck is terrible, but I love it, and I'm so glad I brought it.
I don't remember that guy. That's good, though, for them.
Well, yeah. Yeah, I think the main point here, though, is, like, we're not trying to say you're not going to do well, you should expect to lose kind of thing. What we are trying to say, though, is, like, losing, even if you're amazing, scrubbing out of tournaments is a real thing that happens to everyone. And it feels a little different when you're just at your computer at home. You scrub out and you're like, oh, whatever. Like, I was going to play in this tournament today. Now I have my afternoon back. You didn't commit that much to it. When you, like, travel to the venue, you meet up with friends, maybe your friends are doing well and you're doing poorly. Like, this is all stuff that can happen. And you're more invested because you had to go, like, physically there. So I think the push is just, like, be okay. Like, make sure you're okay with having that happen with a bad result. Because they just happen. Like, no one spikes every tournament. A lot of these people are very strong players if you're going to, like, competitive events. So, you don't want to just be like, hey, if I don't win, I'm going to be super disappointed and the day was a waste. If that's, like, your feeling, just don't go to the tournament. Like, it's so rare to win these things.
Exactly. Like, win them. Because obviously, like, the tournament we were in, there were 89 people, obviously, and then there's one winner. So you're like...
And, like, even top 8, right? Like, that's like, less than 10%.
Yeah. You really can't beat yourself up too much. And with that being said, don't feel bad about dropping out of the tournament. Like, the culture really is like, once you lose a certain amount of matches, you just drop, because then you can do other things, because there's just not really much to gain from continuing playing besides like practice, which is nice. But
Actually, that is one difference in like paper events too. My experience has been often when you're like mathematically eliminated from contention. So let's say in this tournament, that would be 3 losses. Once you have 3 losses, you essentially have no chance to win. I actually find it's super common at that stage that you get either a bye in the next round, like you just aren't paired with an opponent, or your opponent does not show up in the next round. And so you're like waiting around for a match that's not even going to happen. It doesn't really have an analog in online play, but in tournaments, like in person, if you're like, oh, I won't drop, I'll just keep playing, you might not actually get to keep playing. Like, people forget to drop from like formally and just leave, and then you get paired against them, and then they're not even in the
room
event in the room anymore. Yeah,
which is what happened to me, because Jeff and I were talking about whether we wanted to drop, because we both technically had the same record, but I had a bye, so I got a free win. And it was like that moment where I was like, oh, my opponent, we're like, oh, let's just do one more round. It's like my opponent didn't show up. And I was like, all right, well, luckily there's other things to do. I got to get some cards signed by Jeff Miracola, which was super cool. Really happy about that. And like look at vendors and things. So there's still stuff to do, but like when you're wanting to actually play your games, it is kind of annoying when people just like don't show up and leave. But hey, that will happen. So please drop if you're going to do that. Like, go to a judge, tell them, hey, I'm dropping from the tournament. Show me how to do it on my phone. It's so easy nowadays. The companion app is awesome. I only have good things to say about that. I know it's screwed up in some tournaments. I haven't been part of those tournaments, so that's why.
In our event, it was great. And like, as someone who's used to you have to go up and find your name on the pairings list, and then go back and like find your seat, and then like report on a match slip, all that. Like, this was a huge improvement.
Yeah, it's just so much easier. It's very smooth. You can see everything on you don't have to ask anybody about anything. Like, all the standings are on your phone. All your wins and losses and everything is on your phone. You can check it. If there's a problem, you can talk to somebody. It's just a lot easier.
Yeah, I think the next step for it is to like integrate deck lists, because we still had to write deck lists out by hand. And in the main event, which was open deck list, you had to like swap the piece of paper during the match and like read your opponent's handwriting for what their deck list is.
Yeah, which isn't super great. I did see some people who just had a printed deck list that they just like had from their computer, which I think probably going into the future, I'll probably just do that.
Or like if the event uses Melee, maybe you can just check it on Melee.
Yeah, maybe you can put it up. Maybe on your I don't know if you can on your Melee profiles have decks that aren't part of tournaments that you just like upload. All right, this is the deck. Maybe
it's just like an MTG Goldfish like link that you email to your opponent. There you go.
Yeah, they should have ones that like it's the whole deck, but it's all like 60 cards, so you can click on them to like turn them gray. This would be on for Arena, where you all right, these are all the cards that are gone. If you wanted to do that, I don't know why you would really go through the trouble, but you could.
Yeah, that feels excessive.
Hey, some people are really into that stuff.
But there are a lot of fun differences too. Like, when my opponent with dot sees me, that just you have to give time for them to write all your cards down and stuff like that.
Yeah, and turn them towards them and put them down on the table.
Yeah, which was kind of fun. I was like, Dotsy, all right, here you go.
Yeah,
read them and weep.
Yeah, and you just get to sit back and you get to look at them and see which ones they're going to pick. Which is because most of the time I'm talking when somebody's thought-seizing me on Arena. I'm like, oh, you're going to go for this one? I know you're going to pick this one. This is the one you want. I don't know if other people talk when just to themselves, but I do.
Oh, all the time, yeah.
And then, of course, when they pick the card that I was expecting them to take, I say nice. But in the tournament, I'm just like, yep. Okay.
In the tournament, I go, oh, really?
Okay. Wow, jeez.
Well, you're going to take Mayhem Devil? That's weird.
That's really
Yeah.
weird. Yeah, no, I think the only time I got Thoughtseize, they took my collected company. And I'm like, yep, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense.
It's like the old modern thing when it's like you always have to take Snapcaster Mage. 'Cause if you take something else, the Snapcaster Mage just gets it back.
Just gets it back.
It's just like, yeah, well, whatever. You had a Snapcaster in your hand, so obviously I'm taking it.
Yeah. Yeah, the card that gets other cards back. Makes sense.
Yeah.
But yeah, we have some more kind of stories and things. But I wanted to save that till after our beer break. So, Jeff, do you want to go to a beer break, grab another beer, and then get into those?
Let's do it.
This beer break is brought to you by our patrons over on Patreon.
That's right. You're already supporting the show just by being a listener. But if you want to support the show even more, our Patreon is the best way to do that. Plus, you get to vote on which co-host you think did better in the Pioneer Open by buying me a beer.
Or buying me a beer. So go to patreon.com/arenaregulars to vote on which host you think did the best.
Or if you'd prefer to congratulate us on our stunning success online, you can do that on our Arena Regulars Discord channel. The link should be in the show notes.
All right, now this may be my dyslexia coming in, and everyone knows how much I love reading and or slash hate it. I definitely thought this said enchant when I bought it, and I was like, "Oh, perfect! A beer called Enchant." I love enchantments. I love playing aura decks. This will be perfect for the podcast. Turns out it does not say that. There's an accent, and it's spelled weird. It actually it says Ashante.
That's right.
But it's from Mascot Brewery. It's their tart cherry wheat. Very enchanté. So
Indeed.
I feel like a fool, but that's all right. I feel like that most of the time, so it's fine.
Yeah, whatever.
Not too weird. It is also 4.5%. So a lot of little light ones this evening, which I'm coming more on the side of, hey, beers that don't have too much alcohol in it. Yeah, I'm
Oh yeah, if it's still like flavorful, then I'm all for it. I just find a lot of them are like pretty lame.
yeah, they tend to be a little whoa. a little lame. Whoa. That one has flavor for sure. I was just trying to talk through it, so it got me a little bit. Anyway, let's get back into some lessons that we learned in this tournament. I think they're mainly my lessons, or they're just kind of things to think about, or good practices when we're going to the tournament. A little bit more practical stuff.
Yeah, I feel like this time will be, the first segment was a little more, how do you get into this? What are the things you should be thinking about? That kind of stuff. Now it's going to be a little more specific advice.
A little bit more specific.
I think maybe we should just talk about
our
quickly recount our experience.
Sure, I think that's good.
That can let us get into some of the specifics of how we did. So Zach, how did your tournament go?
It went. It was okay. It was a lot of fun.
It went. Yeah.
It went. It definitely happened.
It occurred.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Like I said before, I picked my deck a little bit too early, and so kind of coming into it, I was like, I already feel like I don't know if my deck choice is correct, but whatever. And we ended up playing 5 rounds. I went 2 and 3 in the tournament, but one of them was a bye, and I had to play against. I was playing Bant Spirits, and I had to play against the Lotus Field combo deck, Rakdos Midrange, Mono Black, and then Rakdos Sacrifice. Some idiot was playing that deck.
Yeah, I saw that. Man, that guy was handsome, though.
Yeah. Yes, Jeff and I got paired against each other, and yes, Jeff won. In Game 3, though, we did have to go to Game 3, so...
It was a good match.
It was a good
match. Game
match.
1 was I was dead on board next turn, and I had you, I think, exactly dead with all my Mayhem triggers and, Mayhem Devil triggers.
It was I was at 11, I think, and you attacked with 4 1/1s. I could only block 3 of them, and you ended up getting me to 10 and then having 10 Mayhem Devo triggers, which I was like, what? I didn't see it, so I was like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
It was probably
I think there was a shrapnel blast.
It was the shrapnel blast that got me, yeah. So, anyway, yeah, it was great. The biggest thing I think that happened in the tournament was I cheated on accident. I accidentally cheated. Now, this is a thing that doesn't really happen on Arena. You can't accidentally cheat because cards will just do what they do on Arena. However, as most of you know, I'm sure, you've played cards wrong in the past. And I played a card wrong that I've been playing with for a very long time. It's one of my favorite cards. And there's something about playing in person that sometimes you get swept up into stuff. And the pace of play you can get caught up in it a little bit, where people will just do things and kind of look at you like expecting like you know what they're doing, or you play a creature and they immediately tap and then they point a card at it, and you might not exactly know which one of the cards it is, but you know it's one that kills it. So you're like, okay, I don't remember. For me, it's like a 1/1 flyer, so it's like I don't remember if it kills anything but angels and demons or whatever, or you have to lose 2 life. I don't remember which one it is, but I know it dies. That kind of thing.
Right.
So I was playing against mono black, and they were playing basically like a bunch of the vampire, the 2/3 vampire that has lifelink and death touch and stuff like that, and invoke despair. But a situation that doesn't come up very often is that they had animated their Hive of the Eye Tyrant, and I had a Rattle Chains on board, and I cast my Skyclave Apparition targeting their Hive of the Eye Tyrant, and exiled it. And then 6 turns later, a judge came by and was like, "What the fuck happened here?" basically. And I was like, "Oh, well, I just exiled it." And he's like, "Yeah, that card says non-land permanent." And me and my opponent were like, "Oh, fuck."
Right.
Because we both let it happen. Like, he could have easily been like, "You can't target that." And I would have been like, "Ah, damn it. I played it, and it doesn't have a target, so it doesn't do that." But we both didn't realize it at the time because we both were like, "Wow, what a good play." I was like, "Wow, I'm so smart. I can't believe I've never done that play before. It's so good." And I was thinking,
Why have
like,
I never done that before?
that doesn't really happen because normally they don't have creature lands animated on my turn when I play Skyclave. But I had Rattle Chain, so I played it at flash speed. You can't do that. So I cheated on accident. It was game 3. The judge came by, basically said, "Hey, you have a warning, or like for a penalty or whatever. If you have another one, then we'll have to give you a game loss." But I just looked at my opponent and I was like, I'm gonna lose. I would have lost if I didn't do that illegal move. This game's already over. I concede, and we didn't finish the turn. I just said, "I'm done. Good job. You get the match. I fucked up. I shouldn't have accidentally cheated." And him and the judge were both surprised, by the way, which I don't know. Maybe I shouldn't have done that. Maybe I should just have kept playing and see if I could win. But it just didn't feel like the right thing. So anyway, at that
it's
point,
hard to say. Like, I wasn't there, so I don't know how badly you would have gotten wrecked if you hadn't done that. You know, like if it was still, who knows? But you think maybe you would have been like not favored. That's a little different than like, the Hive of the Eye Tyrant was lethal, and you flushed this thing in and like got rid of it.
Yeah, it definitely.
And I'm sure the answer is somewhere in between, but
it definitely wasn't that. But it was a card that I knew I would have had to trade like 2 cards from my hands to get off the battlefield, and it just would have been really. I just wouldn't have had the board presence I had at that time if that had happened. Anyway, and that was my second loss, so I had already felt like, this is kind of over. So it was a little bit of oh man, I made a mistake and my tournament's over because of it. So, as always, on Arena, you would flash that in and try to target it, and it wouldn't let you target it, and you'd be like, "Oh shit!" And then
you'd shame concede, but it'd be for a different reason.
It would be for a different reason.
Kind of shame concede.
Yeah. Instead of being like, "Wow, I'm dumb," it's "Wow, I'm a cheater," which made me feel really worse. Really, actually.
Oh, way worse.
I felt way worse. But anyway,
it's worth saying. Like, this stuff it happens.
Yeah.
I think think it's worth like calling out how the system works too. Like you explained it a little bit, but basically you get warnings because you're given the benefit of the doubt that you weren't trying to cheat. But the reality is there are like what modern day cheating tends to look like is people take advantage of these situations consistently. They only point out the ones that like don't favor them and then let things like this happen for things that do favor them. Like, oh, play my Skyclave, target your thing. Maybe my opponent like won't know and will let it happen. Like they're doing it on purpose, right? Obviously it's not the case here, but that's what the warning system is meant for. If even if your opponent had noticed, right, or you had noticed, 6 turns later, you call a judge, you say, hey, we made this illegal move, but it's been so many turns that we can't undo it. And they'll give you a warning. And the idea is if you get a whole bunch of warnings, it's so much more likely that you're doing this on purpose. Either you're a really sloppy player and you like deserve the game loss, or you are like, that's how we identify the people that are trying to skate by and like never get caught for cheating, even though they are cheating. And so you always make sure when you notice something like that, just make sure you let someone know, because they might be doing it on purpose, taking advantage of you, and you don't want them to take advantage of the next person, and stuff. So obviously in this case, it was the honest thing. Like neither of you just realized that. Or I don't know, maybe you were cheating. Who knows? Maybe you came here with the intent to fool people with Skyclave apparition.
Yeah, because sometimes, you know, like I was saying before, like you're not really reading everyone's cards because you're trying to be like, I know what that does and all that stuff. And so you get kind of caught up in like I'm sure all of you have had the same experience of like, oh, this card gets rid of 4 CMC stuff or less or whatever. It just can't hit tokens is a big thing that I like. I know it can't hit tokens. So I'm very focused on that aspect of it as opposed to the, non-land shit.
Right.
So
anyway. Like you said, it's so rare that you're trying to target a land with it.
It just never happens. But I do want to say, with that being said, judges are people that you should consider them like impartial parties to the game, and they do just want everyone to play correctly. So don't feel weird about calling a judge. Like, if I had noticed that had gone wrong, I probably would have called the judge to be like, hey, what do we do? This has happened.
I've called the judge on myself many
just
times.
Wanting
I was like, hey, I accidentally cheated. Neither of us realized. Now I'm starting to realize, but it's been way too long.
Way too long, exactly.
I can't just not do it, because we don't know how it would have changed
everything. And we can't just like start over, because that's not how it works.
Right.
So if there's anything weird that happens, call a judge. And all you do is you just raise your hand and you go, judge, and then you hold your hand up until the judge comes over, and they'll come help you figure out whatever is going on. And they are really nice. One of the judges, we were watching a match that had to go to time, and it was just crazy long. And while it was happening, it was basically like Karuga Fires versus Celestia Angels. And it was the craziest board state. Me and Jeff were just standing there being like, what is happening? The Karuga Fires player had like a Siege Rhino on board, and we're like, what? It was just like
happening?
All this stuff. And basically they ended up going to time, and it was game 1, and so they just drew the match.
It's just a draw.
But immediately after the draw, some of the spectators went up to the Karuga Fires player and said, hey, you could have done this to win the game, which was he had 2 Kiki-Jikis that were flipped on the board. He could have made a bunch of Kiki-Jikis on the Angel player's end step, and then he could have copied a bunch of Siege Rhinos to drain their life, and then do it again and again and again. And they're like, you could have won because of that. It would have taken
like every mana you have is drained for 3.
Yeah.
Easy to kill someone that way.
Yes. So, and that kind of shook that player a little bit. But the judge was sitting there the whole time and like heard people say that, and basically sat with him and was like, hey, if you need time to collect yourself before the next match, just tell us, like get paired, sit down, and just tell a judge, hey, I need 5 minutes. I gotta calm down. I'm getting flustered. He's like, if people are flustering you, tell them can you please go away? I need to focus. And the judges are there to help you do that.
And they're like, we'll give you a time extension if you need to take some time.
So, which is very nice because when they watch your games, you do get flustered. It happened to me and Jeff. We were going along, and it was like, it's nerve wracking when people are like everyone's watching you because you're the only game left, And they walk up and they're like, "All right, you're the last one," and we're like, "Oh God, okay. I want the game to end, but I want to win."
Right. So I want to play well.
Mm-hmm. And so you can get a little bit flustered. So try not to let that happen.
Yeah, but the judges are great, and you should, I think there's some people that feel like, oh, I'm telling on my opponent or something if I call a judge and say we did something wrong. Mm-hmm. But that's not really the case. Everyone understands. You always just call a judge. Especially, I would say, I've seen too many people, take their opponent's word for how something works. Like, their opponent will be like, oh, I play this card, the interaction works like this, so that's going to die. They're like, oh, okay, because they assume their opponent knows how their own cards work and stuff like that. If you're ever unsure, you just call a judge. Like, what's the big deal? The judge comes over, confirms that that's how it works. Now you know you're not that you want to accuse somebody of trying to take advantage of you. It's just that judges are experts in the rules. You're unsure of how these rules work at the moment, so you want an expert to explain it to you. That's all. And an unbiased one, too. Your opponent, even if they have great intentions, they're biased. They want to win.
They want to win. So they will tell you about things that may help them as opposed to stuff that won't,
Yeah.
So yeah. But that was kind of my tournament. Jeff, how was yours?
Very similar. Also did not do well and had to, pair against my co-host. Mm-hmm. My first two, I think for me, the sort of storyline for the event for me was with Rakdos Sacrifice, I want to play against regular decks, I guess, like fair decks that just want to play creatures and spells and, do that whole song and dance. When I picked the deck, the best decks in the format were Rakdos midrange, mono green, ramp, essentially. I mean, I won't go into exactly how the mono green deck works, but you can think of it as a ramp deck. And Is It Phoenix was starting to get more and more popular. And all three of those, I think, not necessarily strong matchups for me in the sense that I should win them, but I have game in all of them. My deck, all of those decks play creatures. I like to interact with creatures, and then I like to sort of drain the opponent out over a few turns. What ended up happening in this event is that there's a lot of non-interactive combo decks, which my deck is quite poor against. I don't kill people fast enough to get under them, and I just don't slow you down. The game plan is I'm gonna if you don't play creatures, I don't slow you down. I can interact with your creatures, and I have inevitability because I have all these Mayhem Devils, Kata, and stuff. I'm eventually gonna win. But when you're playing against Lotus Field combo, which literally my opponent beat me on turn 4 on the play with a combo that there's nothing I could do anything about, that's a horrible matchup. So my first 2 rounds was first one was Karuga 5-color Fires of Invention, which is an awful matchup because they have so much interaction. They have a lot of life gain. They have big stuff. There's just no real way for me to win that match. My opponent was even saying that after, if you win, I must, I did something wrong. This matchup is, horrible for you. Mm-hmm. And then the combo decks. So I not that I misread the metagame necessarily, because, I said, you have to, because of card availability and, the intricacies of building a deck in paper, I sort of had to choose early, and I chose the deck that I like that's fun. But my first 2 rounds were against decks that were very, very challenging matchups, and I lost them. And then I got to play against creature decks. From there on out, I played against Rakdos, then I played, obviously, against you, and then I played against Is It Phoenix. And those matches were a lot more fun because it felt like the first two matches was like I'm sitting there just waiting to die. My opponent's at like 17. Like there's just literally no chance for me. I need to like triple shrapnel blast you out of this game. Like there's just no chance for me to win.
Hey, at least in Lotus Field combo, if you have Mayhem Devil out, they have to sacrifice 2 lands. So there's 2 triggers.
That's
right there.
true. It never came up, but but it was a lot of fun. Like I think one big takeaway for me was like, even though I know how the deck works super well, I've played a lot of it, I was still making mistakes based on like tracking my own triggers, because there's a lot of triggers in the deck, and I would forget to say one because I'm so used to Arena doing it for me that I'd have to be like, and then it messes up your count because the deck's all about very specifically counting to the right number. Oh, I need 5 triggers to kill that Shieldred, or you're at 11, I need to do 11. And so you like miss a trigger somewhere and you're like, oh, now the whole play is bad because like I now have 3 damage on your Shieldred and I only have 1 more thing to sack. And it's like, this is like horrible. So there was a lot of that kind of stuff. So that's where the practice you mentioned would come in. Like just literally even just goldfishing my deck, playing it and calling out triggers like on my own, I think would have helped. I just sort of assumed I would be fine at it. And it's just been so long since I've played in paper that tracking those triggers was rough. I also had an instance of like cheating, quote unquote, but it was basically just like when I played against my Rakdos mid-range opponent, we both did a lot of stuff that was like, wait a minute, we can't do that. But the one that I remember most is like my opponent just tapped their Reckoner Bankbuster to draw a card. It did not pay the 2 mana. They did not have 2 mana available to do that. And like they drew the card. Did they draw? I think I might have stopped them just in time. But like if they had drawn that card, that would have been annoying because you have to like then now they've seen that, you have to go back, shuffle their deck and stuff. But what did happen is I caught it and I was like, oh, do you have 2 mana to pay for that? It's like, no, you're right, I can't do that. But I forgot to like he had already removed a counter from the Bankbuster.
Gotcha.
And then later in the game he was able to remove the final counter and make a pilot. But then I was like, wait, did we... I feel like you've only activated that twice because there was that false activation. You shouldn't have a pilot right now, right? Like, so we had to sort of retroactively figure all of that out. Because I was like, whoa, don't draw that card, you know. Like, but I wasn't paying attention to he'd already moved the die down to just 1. So that kind of stuff, it just happens. Like if you play in 5 matches in a paper event, I think it's bound to happen to you. At least one like weird thing where you do something wrong because there's just so much to track. It's hard to keep track of everything.
So, moral of the story, Arena players don't cheat and paper players always do.
It's exactly. Yeah, paper players are cheaters.
Yeah, paper players are fucking cheaters.
Especially Arena players who then go try to play paper. Yeah, we're like the biggest cheaters of all because we're just so used to Arena. Like it even taps my lands for me. Sometimes I just put cards down and I didn't pay for them. I didn't tap any lands. And my opponent's like, "What lands did you tap for that?" I'm like, "Oh yeah, I
gotta do this."
Because like on Arena, you just throw the card on the table and it pays.
It's so much faster, and also like playing some of those like, oh, I guess I lose decks. Like in Arena, you can just like give up. You can concede immediately and then just jump into another match. But if you play it in...
Or I like go get a sandwich or something.
Yeah.
When you used to play against... what was that? Like Nexus of Fate?
Yeah, you're just like, oh...
In paper, I'm sitting there like poking fun at my opponent a little bit, which was also fun. But they're like doing this combo that requires 45 actions. And I'm just like cracking jokes wherever I can get anything.
Trying to make...
On Arena, I like go get a beer or something.
Yeah, exactly. Because you're looking at the chess clock, because the chess clock matters on Arena. In paper, you don't have that. There's no chess clock. So, like, if your opponent's taking a long time, then you might just draw. Like, you won't even finish the match. Where in Arena, your opponent just loses if they run out of their clock, which is a big advantage in Arena, really. Being like, yeah, it didn't take as long to think. And
yeah,
in paper,
it makes so much more sense. It'd just be so hard to implement. Like, imagine actual chess clocks playing in paper. Anytime you pass priority, you have to hit the chess clock.
Oh, God. So confusing.
Too much.
Too many. Not just turns, just like whole things. And then you'd have to buy a bunch of chess clocks. No, I guess you'd use a phone. Anyway, I did want to say that cracking jokes is a big thing. Trying to make your opponent laugh is something that I found really important. Not like I'm going to trick them into doing bad things or making bad plays because I'm doing this, but it made everything more enjoyable. So, like, if you're losing, even if you're winning, whatever, just like trying to remember, hey, my opponent's just like me. We're both here trying to play, trying to have a good time. If you can try to loosen them up as much as you can. So the joke I kind of had was I didn't have the right tokens for Skyclave Apparition. I just had like random tokens I was giving people. And one guy used a Yu-Gi-Oh card he had as a token, which was awesome. I was like, great. It was like a little corn. It was like a guy who was like, he was an animated corn guy. It was really weird. But anyway.
It's a Yu-Gi-Oh card?
Yeah. So Yu-Gi-Oh cards can be weird.
Yeah.
But anyway, one of my opponents, he had a Fable of the Mirror Breaker, and he had like the Goblin Shaman token. And then he played another Fable and put out, he's like, I don't have the token, so he just flipped over it's like some card, and that was going to be the token. And I was like, whoa. All right, if you don't have the token, if you don't have the real token, you can't have the token. Like, you got to have the real one. And he looks at me like I'm seriously telling him he can't do that. And I'm like, I'm just kidding. It's fine. I was like, I'm using this bullshit. I'm using like a weird art card as my token. You're fine. And so then he laughed, and then we got to release a little bit of tension. That's like, because you can get a little too focused. Not too focused, but, got to remember to breathe a little bit, put some life into the game. It's fun. It's a game. We should be playing. It's all about, just don't forget that. I think it was a really important thing going into...
For sure.
Specifically these types of tournaments where they seemingly don't have anything like that in them. And I think that's just false. It's just something people say and who've never...
I'm not really sure where that narrative comes from. Like, I think there's one or two bad eggs, or maybe not even bad egg, but like people who take it very seriously, which is their prerogative. But most of the people I find, in my experience, have been like happy to joke around with you and like, it's not like don't talk to me unless it's about explaining a game action that you're taking.
Yeah.
It's just not the case.
Exactly.
Like, I had my O2 start against the like non-interactive decks, but both those opponents were very nice and like we were joking around and having fun. Like my Lotus Field opponent, for those who don't know, like the goal is to use Thespian Stage to copy Lotus Field. Lotus Field taps for 3, but you have to sack 2 lands and ETBs. But if you copy one and it's already in play, you don't have to sack the lands. So you just get like a second Lotus Field that now taps for 3, sort of for free. My opponent had like Lotus Field, Thespian Stage, and Temple of Mystery or something. And my opponent's going into the tank, like calculating basically if I'm dead. Spoiler alert, I was indeed dead. But they keep untapping that. They generate a ton of mana. They play like Omniscience, and they go get whatever. However they want to kill you after that is up to them. They have a bunch of tutors to get whatever card they need. But my opponent's like, because they're in the tank, he's just like, okay, activate Thespian Stage. Then I'm going to and then he starts talking about his next play. So I'm just like going along with him. Yeah, sure. And then he's like, activate Thespian Stage. I'm like, cool. Copy Temple of Mystery. Yep. And because you can copy any land, right? And he's like, yeah. Then, or like he didn't actually verbally acknowledge that. He was just like thinking about his next play. He's like, wait, no. I'm copying Lotus Field. And he like looks up at me, and I just have a smile on my face. I'm like, yeah, it's okay. I know you're copying Lotus Field. Like. I didn't really believe that you were copying Temple of Mystery, don't worry.
Yeah. Where, those players may have run into people or worry about people doing something like that to them And that's
Trying
like
to angle shoot.
yeah, and that's angle shooting where you're like, oh well, you said that you were, and then they call a judge, and that's the kind of those are the kind of shitty players that we're talking about that we don't see a lot of them. I didn't run into anybody like that. Apparently, I am that. I guess.
Yeah, you are the angle shooter.
I'm the angle shooter. I'm the shitty guy.
I've never played against somebody like that. I've heard of it. Like, I've heard stories of people, even at our events, like, oh, did you see what the person at table 3 did or whatever? But I've never actually encountered it.
You have encountered slow players, though. I've heard stories about that.
But, yeah, that was the worst I've seen. Someone who was like intentionally playing slow to try to get the draw and then bragged about that later. That's like, all right, that's a weird thing to brag about.
All right.
It's bragging about cheating.
Yeah. I didn't lose that match, but I also didn't win.
Yeah.
Anyway, we kind of have a list of things. These are just normal life things to remember for the most part. But when you get focused in the game, sometimes Magic can like twist your mind a little bit, and you just get so drilled in and focused on what you're doing that you can forget about normal things like getting some good sleep the night before the tournament. A lot of these things, if you're traveling, which I'm assuming if it's your first tournament, you're probably not traveling that far. But maybe don't go out. We are always telling you to like go drink beers and have fun with your friends. Maybe just have a cap on it the night before. You don't have to not go out. I'm not going to ever tell you not to drink a beer, but like maybe don't start doing shots. Maybe that's it. Don't shoot shots the night before you got a tournament.
This used to happen to me all the time where I'd schedule some Magic tournaments. Like, okay, cool. Like, I'm going to play Saturday morning or Sunday morning at this place, this PTQ. And I'd have nothing on my schedule. And then somebody like late in the week would be like, hey man, I'm having a sick rager Friday night. I'm like, it's a party Saturday night. We got to go. And then I'd always be like, all right, fine. And then I go and then like hungover the next day and I lose one of my first 2 matches. And then I lock in and start to do really well, but now I have bad breakers because I lost in like the early rounds. It seemed to happen every time that if I had a Magic tournament scheduled, somebody would want me to like, they would have some party that pops up the night before and I was too dumb to like not go.
Yeah.
Or too dumb to go. You know what I'm saying.
To not also like you can go, but you don't have to go hard. But sometimes it's hard because you want to be, if you're in that setting, you want to be the life of the party. And sometimes you just have to be like, you know what? I won't be this time. And that can be hard to do sometimes. But other normal things you should do on a tournament day: take a shower, feel your best, wear nice clothes, just feel good. That's a big thing.
Right.
You
want to be comfortable for sure. Yeah.
Feel comfortable. If I take a shower and like shave and stuff, that usually makes me feel really good about myself. So do those kinds of things. The old joke, wear deodorant because it's so smelly in there. Sure. Yes. Personal hygiene is important. And if you tend to forget to take care of yourself, there may be some other things going on in your life that you might need to work out. It might not just be a lazy thing. But do those things. But our tournament was definitely not the sweaty room. I need to leave.
No, I didn't find that at all.
Kind of thing. So
yeah,
I'm sure that might be in some places, but that just doesn't need to be something we necessarily perpetuate. But also, hey, feel good, smell good. It's not a big deal. Something weird that you have to do, just like be early, get your deck registered because you have to write all your cards down, which is something we don't normally have to do. And other things like bring water with you and food. Food. Eat.
Yeah, that one's huge.
Eat before you go because there are not always vendors selling food wherever you are or coffee. Jeff and I didn't have coffee for the very beginning, and luckily I got pretty wrecked pretty early in my first match against Lotus Combo, so I ran out to get us coffee because I was like, I'm going to need something.
Yeah, I was playing against like 5-color fires. They don't kill fast, so I took all the time. But Lotus Field wins on turn 4. So.
Yeah, on turn 4 you can be... I let him go through the combo once, and then the next time he was on the combo, I was just like, yep, you got it, you win.
Sure.
I'm
Yeah. You have omniscience and you cast a tutor. I'm pretty good to concede.
I think we're done. So
yeah, the eating thing is huge. Like, even when they had chip trucks, or like this event that Zach and I went to had no food in the actual event hall. There was no, whatever, food trucks or like coffee stands or anything
Literally
like that.
nothing.
There's nothing. Ones I've been to in the past, like pre-COVID, did have those things, like stalls set up essentially that sold food. But even when I went to those events, it's very difficult to eat between rounds because rounds are like 50 minutes. It's a pretty tight timeline when you're playing in paper Magic against somebody. Like, it sounds like a lot of time, but then it's not really. Like, you're always surprised how little time you have before the next round. And the lines are long at these things.
Mm-hmm.
So even when those things were there, I generally found like the only way I got to eat was if I was somehow done my match in like 10 minutes, which is quite rare. So yeah, just make sure you like eat something beforehand, because there's the distinct possibility, your tournament's at 10 a.m. that you might not eat till like 2 or 3.
Yeah. And if you do really well, there's going to be a top 8 and everything. So, like, bring some sort of, I don't know, granola bars or Cliff bars or whatever you have in your bag. And bring water, because just having it by you, kind of on the ground or in your bag, is really helpful. Because, hey, hydration is also good for your brain. Who knew?
Not me.
But those are weird things. They sound like dumb things to remind you of. But, like, when you're in your house playing on Arena, those things are all by you. You have a bathroom close by. Like, you can wear comfy clothes. You can be in your pajamas. There's food, all that kind of stuff. If we play in Arena Opens, you don't have to worry about times. Like, you just play and you stop to go eat lunch. Like, these events,
exactly.
you can't. So, literally, me and Jeff were just trying to figure out, like, do we go to a draft event or do we just get some food because we're hungry? And we ended up just getting food and beers because we're like, I just want that right now. I don't need to do something else.
Yeah,
so.
we both went 2-3 in this event.
Yeah.
We had like the misfortune of matching in round 4, which is like the worst possible thing, because when you get your third loss, you're eliminated. We were both at 1 and 2.
Yeah, we were at 1 and 2.
So it meant one of us for sure was like done, because a draw knocks us both out, and then a win knocks out whoever didn't win.
Yeah. So yeah. Team kills, man. We were even joking about it before it happened. It's like, what are the chances we get paired against each other? And then it's like, we got paired against each other.
Yeah. So I even like made a joke in our Discord. I was like, just take out all of your like anti-Rakdos sacrifice stuff in your side.
I was like, yeah, because I'm ever going to get paired against you. No one's going to play Rakdos Sac. It was fine. Then we go to the match and I'm like, fuck.
Where's all my sideboard stuff?
I don't have any sideboard cards against your deck. That's not true. I had one. And it came in handy. So another thing people mention, like in your deck box or just the things that you bring in general, try not to bring too many cards. In your deck box, only keep your deck, your sideboard, and your tokens. No other random cards, even if they're not sleeved, because things can look iffy.
Yeah, so this is important to call out. People might not know how this works. It's not an issue online, but basically you're not allowed, just like in an online or a lot of online events, you're not allowed to change your deck between rounds. You're not allowed to, like, oh, this sideboard card's not working out, I'm going to swap it. So you have to write down what is your deck at the very start, and then you give it to the judges, and they have a big pile of everyone's deck. But they can't, it's too inefficient, it's too time consuming to actually check everyone, like, hey, give me your deck, show me that you are playing the cards that you said you are playing, and I'll verify that. So what they do is they randomly take decks. So what'll happen is you have shuffled your deck and you present it to your opponent, meaning you've given your deck to your opponent because they have to shuffle it to ensure you're not cheating. When you do that, the judge will swoop in at whatever random table has been selected. So you don't know that you've been selected and you were just about to let your opponent shuffle your deck. And then they will take your decks and verify that the cards that you have presented to your opponent are the ones that you wrote down. That's how they sort of try to stop the potential deck cheating, is just do it randomly and you'll never know when they're going to check you. What that means, though, is like if you have cards that are not in your list in your deck box, that can be a problem. They take your deck, they take your sideboard, they take the box that you're using. If you forgot to take your sideboard cards out from the previous round, one's still in your deck when you presented it, that's a problem. You now look like, from their eyes, they can't distinguish from an honest mistake and cheating. And so there's a few more like technical things to worry about here, and that's what Zach's saying. Like, don't bring extra cards. I've lost games because I had an extra card that I was considering from my deck, and eventually decided not to play it, and I just had it in the same deck box as like a, well, it's convenient. Let's hold everything in the same box. Even though that card was in a different sleeve than the rest of my deck, I still was penalized for that. I still got a game loss for that deck list violation. That was a long time ago, and they've gotten a little more lenient, but still, like, that's the type of stuff that happens. So just don't have extra cards. You have your 75, and you have any tokens you might need, stuff like that. That's fine. But don't have, the sideboard card that I cut last minute is still in my deck box. You make sure you put that somewhere else.
Yeah. And that somewhere else is hopefully not a bunch of other cards. Just because, like, it's totally fine to bring a backpack or whatever, but you want to make sure that you know where it is, keep your leg around it. These are events where people do snag things. It happens every once in a while. There's a big event. Someone's collection gets stolen. Somebody's looking at your trade binder and you look away and you look back and they're gone. Or your bag just gets snagged from wherever. Or even in your car, somebody might take your collection that you brought, your whole collection, in the parking garage. And I'm just saying that this does happen, so be wary of that. If you have commander decks you want to play, or obviously bring those. All those like side event things, have that stuff with you, but you don't need to bring the cream of the crop, all your best stuff with you. It's heavy. You have to keep track of it, and you want to spend your like mental energy focusing on the tournament as opposed to, where are my belongings? I hope they're not getting stolen.
Yeah.
So, yeah, all the normal things. One really last thing is that when you're talking with your opponent, you just want to be very clear and communicate very well all the things you're doing. Like Jeff was talking about triggers earlier. You want to make sure that they know where all the triggers are going, and you don't want to speak too quickly or play too fast so that things get muddled, because people will try to interact with stuff at certain times, and it can get a little confusing. So you always want to be on the same page. If there's any question, did you tap that for this, or did stop and ask, talk to your opponent. All those things are really, really important, and something we don't deal with on Arena. So communicating, huge. Huge.
Yeah.
Jeff, I did look up a couple things on Reddit to see if we missed anything.
This will be good and important.
Yeah, but all of them were the normal kinds of things that we had already kind of run through. I did see someone say, just get ready because you're going to see a lot of butt cracks, but that's normal, so don't panic, which I thought was kind of funny. I didn't happen to see any butt cracks on this, but whatever. Sometimes people just forget their belt or don't wear belts or I don't know, their pants don't fit. But that just happens in life, though. You see butt cracks.
That's right, yeah.
A lot of, like, men that have pants that don't fit very well. You'll see that. As well as, Jeff, playing mind games with your opponent is always fun. But a good way to do that is you can just, call your opponent daddy a lot. It throws them off. Completely.
Where was this tip before the tournament?
Yeah, exactly. I could have used this. Pass the turn to you, Daddy. I tap 4 mana, Daddy, and I'm going to cast this big old Daddy. I guess that's about a creature, but that all sounds awesome. We can be like Elishnorn and talking to Karn about how what a daddy.
And you don't get to do that on Arena because there's no daddy emote. So.
What the hell is that? Why didn't we get a sticker or something that said like it's? Maybe we'll get it in the Phyrexia plane we're going to. All will be one.
I was joking with my first round opponent about like I should only communicate with arena emotes through the entire game. Like, and just bring big speech bubbles that have the arena emotes. And just like pull out the one that I want to use.
Hello.
Nice.
Good game.
Nice.
Good game. Yeah. That's great. I did see a friend of ours on Twitter had posted when I was asking kind of about advice for new Paper Magic players. They were just saying that when you blame the shuffler for your bad draws, the shuffler is you. So, shuffler's rigged. Hey, no lands. Next hand, all lands. Shuffler's rigged. This is Watsy garbage. I thought that was great. Always a good time to just complain about the shuffling. But before we go into last call, I said this before, but I want to reiterate it again, that this is a game, so have fun and take your time. Play at your own pace. Don't let anybody make you go too fast or too slow. And just enjoy.
Unless it's a judge saying you need to.
Well, yeah, of course. If the judge is telling you, then you should listen to the judge. But have a good time. Don't rush through it, really. Sometimes you can get a little bit too caught up in things, not just from a game perspective of like you're missing things or just going too quickly and not reading your cards correctly, like me. But also, you don't know how many times you'll be able to do this. So being able to soak in as much of that as you can, always a good thing. Live your life to the fullest. And playing in a Magic tournament is definitely living your life to the fullest, I think.
That's right.
It's a really good time. If you haven't tried it, I highly recommend doing it so that you can get your own experience from it, as opposed to just having to listen to us or other people talk about it. But it's a lot of fun.
Yeah. Even though I went 2-3 with after an 0-2 start, which means, you're about as bad a start as possible. Like, your outlook is not good at that point. I still had a blast, like everyone. Super nice. I got to play against 5 totally different decks, which is always a cool thing. It's not just like losing to the same deck over and over again. And yeah, I didn't run into any opponents that were not like friendly or funny or willing to have a laugh. So if you're like feeling nervous about doing it, I'd say take that leap because it's super fun.
Absolutely. Also, if you have any questions, just come onto our Discord. We'd love to talk to you about it and kind of ease you in. I'm not a pro by any sense. Obviously, this is my first one, but I'd love to get more people excited about things like this because it's really exciting to me. Made me just... I want to do the next one. Jeff, I think it's in Ottawa.
So that's my hometown.
So yeah, maybe we'll have to head up to that one. But anyway, for the time being, it is last call. So we're going to rate the beers of the evening and pick our favorite for last. As always, we rate our beers on a scale of bronze to mythic, just like the tiers in Arena. This has nothing to do with what tier you are currently. It's just a fun way to rate beers because we've all been in different tiers at different times. And yeah, with that being said, bronze beers are trash. They're horrible. We hate them. You have to pour them down the drain. They are the homebrew that I made that has too much... I said this last episode, I think, but it has too much sediment in the bottom, so when you open it up, you can't even drink it. It just spills out everywhere. Fucked it up. You fucked up. You fucked up real bad.
Silver beers basically are just uninteresting. They're not terrible. They're just boring. A lot of macro brews tend to find themselves here.
Yeah. Gold beers are fine, but you won't drink them very often.
Platinum beers are solid. You would definitely drink it again.
Diamond beers are exceptional, and you would recommend these to your friends and drink them after a tournament.
Yeah. And Mythic, well, these are the best of the best. You would go to a tournament because it's near a place that has one of these beers.
Ooh, well, there's some good beers in Ottawa. I might have to go to the tournament.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's true.
Anyway, Jeff, do you have the beer that you want to pick, I guess, for the night?
I do.
All right. think I know what you have, but here we go. 3, 2, 1.
Monday Night
Enchant.
Piper. Enchanté.
Enchanté. Not
All right.
not super surprising.
No.
Let's talk about Monday Night Piper, the one that you picked.
Sure, yeah. So this one was interesting to me. I thought it was pretty good, but I will say it wasn't really what I was expecting. It was kind of like light and sweet. And maybe because we'd been calling it an English ale for weeks. Like English ales are like really malty and sort of the other end of the like it's sort of just completely different stylistically. This was almost like a darkish lager with some sweetness, but it was good, and it wasn't quite what I was expecting.
Yeah. I mean, I
think
liked
it had
it.
Scottish ales
a
that
little
were
bit
like
different than I was.
Scotch ales.
Yeah, it was a little different
what I
than I was expecting. But I think what they were kind of explaining, the toffee definitely came through. So I did like it. I think it is good. I honestly thought that these were really close to me. Close in rating, very different in beers.
Yeah, I was like, what? They're not even remotely similar.
Yeah. Sorry. So I could have kind of gone either way, but I thought I'd stay on brand with the Enchanté. But
I feel exactly the same way. This was more just like a stylistic choice for me rather than thinking one beer like did its job better or, you know, was a better example of its style. It was more, I just tend to prefer this style of beer to the other one, but they're like razor thin, like very close in terms of quality.
I think they're super close. So with that, you know, I'm probably going to give this a platinum. I think it's really solid.
Yeah.
I like it much better than some of the other ones we've had from Second Wedge. I think we started a little bit low and we're coming higher now. So we'll see how we finish out with them. But of those ones, this, you know, if I order more, this will be the beer that I would want to drink.
Yeah, I think I would get this one.
For sure.
Yeah, this one's platinum for sure.
Absolutely. So going on to Enchanté. Enchanté. How do you say it? Is it Enchanté? Why do you say this, Tim?
Enchanté.
Enchanté. All right. So different than what I was expecting. Normally, tart cherry, awesome. Wheat, not as excited about. And I don't really get a lot of wheat, so that was perfect. I was like, great.
Right.
This is so nice.
I feel like here the wheat was just a neutral base so that you actually taste the cherry and taste the tartness.
Yeah.
Definitely comes through. Yeah, this was good.
I thought it was good. I don't know how many I could actually drink of this. Like, if we're going between the two of them and being like, if I had to drink one more right now, I would probably have the Monday Night Piper, just because I could have probably more of those before this one.
It's more like, I don't want to say more drinkable, but it's more like crushable.
Yeah,
like
sessionable.
Yeah.
But this one had a little bit more of an identity of its own, which I liked. So, yeah, that's why I picked it. But I'm also going to give it platinum. I wasn't blown away, but I was kind of on the fence of like, if it tastes too weedy, I'm going to be off it pretty hard. And it didn't. It's a bit juicier than that, which is...
I think I was expecting that too. Like more just like a wheat ale that has a bit of cherry going on. And then I was sort of pleasantly surprised that it's almost more of a sour that wheat just happened to have been used as the base.
Yeah.
Or you know, like a juicy beer or whatever.
Exactly. Or like, it's almost a sour, but most of the flavors at the front of your mouth instead of the back and around your...
Right, yeah.
That kind of feel. And doesn't have that puckeriness. So yeah, I liked it.
These are both pretty clear platinums to me, though.
Very, very clear. Solid. Love it. All right. So now that the beers are finished and the podcast is over, it's time for closing time. You can always reach us at Arena Regulars on Twitter and Instagram.
Or you might find us on MTG Arena itself. We'll be under the username Arena Regulars podcast.
If you want to find me personally, you can find me at Zulberg, that is Zeulberg on Twitter and Instagram. But Jeff, where can they find you?
Best place to find me is on our Discord. My name is Regular Jeff on the Discord, and once again, you should be able to find the link to our Discord in the show notes.
And I'm Regular Zach there too, so find me there as well. Also, please leave us a review on Apple Podcasts, on iTunes. Follow us on Spotify, at all the places you're listening to us right now. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Leave a comment. Any place that you can give us feedback, we would love to get it. It goes a long way. It makes us feel awesome. And so you should do that. This has been the Arena Regulars.
Reminding you that Zach is a cheater.
Good night. All right, that's fine.